It's a question we've been asking for weeks. How do we prevent more people from dying when the next wave of extreme heat hits?
Really about, I think, how we can ensure that folks understand the risk of heat. The high temperatures we're facing aren't the same high temperatures we were facing 10 or 20 years ago.
At the same time, there's a push to keep migrant farm workers safe after a man working at a nursery died in the record-breaking heat.
We need our farm workers to have shade, clean water, a place where they can rest, breaks, because it's tough out there.
And Oregon's latest mega fire has doubled in size again. Now, authorities are threatening to arrest anyone who refuses to leave, and California is scrambling to prevent rolling blackouts, all thanks to the Bootleg fire.
One power line or a corridor of power lines can be a huge deal to an entire region.
Here's the story.
Oof. It's a lot for a Monday. Hey guys, I'm Maggie Vespa. Welcome to The Story. You might have noticed Dan has the day off. Don't worry, he's back tomorrow. And if our shows to that point seems heavy to you based on that open, fear not. We should note, have a follow-up to Pizzagate coming down the pipeline tonight. A lot of you had a lot of thoughts on Portland being declared the best pizza city in America. That surprised a lot of people, and it got spicy in our inbox. So we'll get to your oh-so-hot takes later. But in the meantime, all the ways to contact us are at the bottom of your screen. Per usual, you can email thestory@kgw.com. You can reach out on social media with the hashtag HeyDan. That's the same no matter who's here. We are absurdly reachable, and that's kind of the point, because as you'll see, your feedback drives this show. Let's get started. Okay, so tonight's big story is on the heat and what officials are now saying about who should be held accountable for a forecasted heat wave, an extreme one, a historic one, but one we knew was coming, turning into a mass casualty event. Here's the updated death count from the 3-day heat dome that settled over the Pacific Northwest late last month. The state is reporting 115 confirmed and suspected deaths across Oregon. Local officials say 71 of those happened in Multnomah County. Now, as we said on Friday, we have been pressing and we will keep pressing for the state and for individual counties to give us the names of those who died and where they died. And to be abundantly clear, that's not so we can just publish that info en masse. It's so that we can potentially find patterns among the victims and spot who or what agency, if any, should have done more to save people. Now, the county has said they can't release that info per this state law that says that autopsy and medical examiner reports are private, quote, you'll see, unless the public interest requires disclosure in the particular instance. So we argue there is absolutely a public interest here, and so does our attorney. Last week, I emailed Governor Kate Brown about this. Her office never responded to my email, but she did tweet this, quote, transparency is critical so that Oregonians have the information they need to be better prepared for the next extreme weather event. It's also important, she wrote, that we respect the personal privacy of the Oregonians who lost their lives and their families. Now, the governor added she is directing the medical examiner to release more info on those who died, which the office has, things like zip codes, racial demographics, ages, but not names, not addresses, not anything specific, not enough to know if, say, large numbers of people died in government subsidized housing, government licensed nursing homes, and so on. Now, over the weekend, someone tweeted at me that the state's plan of kind of finding this middle ground seemed reasonable to them. In a brief editorial moment from our team here, here's why we respectfully disagree, okay? These government agencies who are making these decisions about what to release on who died and how and where they died, they're the same ones who may, at least to some degree, need to be held accountable for these deaths. There is an inherent conflict of interest here, one that only abundant transparency can fix. Now, that said, we are learning some things about who did what and, frankly, who could have done more. This weekend, the Oregonian's editorial board published an op-ed slamming the city and slamming TriMet. You might have heard TriMet's equipment basically failed in the heat, and a lot of people couldn't use public transit to get to cooling centers. But the Oregonian also reported the director of the Joint Office of Homeless Services asked a staffer in Portland Parks Commissioner Carmen Rubio's office, in the commissioner's office, if the Parks Bureau could open its air-conditioned community centers for people to cool off it. They've been closed because of COVID. So the response to that request, per the Oregonian, is our quote of the day. That quote is, "The timing is just not great for us right now." Again, that's from Commissioner Rubio's staffer. And we'll just say, yeah, the timing of this deadly heat wave and the mass casualty event that stemmed from it wasn't great for anyone.
And on that note, let's bring in KGW reporter Pat Doris. And Pat, we kind of went through the list of what we know so far and what we've gotten from governing agencies so far. But I should also add that leaders of state agencies who were involved in Oregon's response to this heat wave had a press conference today, and you covered that. So basically, what can you tell us about what they had to say today?
Well, they're doing what they call an after-action report, which is going to take till the end of the month to figure out. But basically, it's analyzing what they did, what went right, what went wrong. And what came from this is that they are trying to change their culture and their philosophy. Typically, they wait for the local people down at the very neighborhood level to say, hey, we've got a problem we can't solve. And then that goes to the county. And then the county, if they can't solve it, they go to the state and say, we need help. That takes way too long in something like an intense 3-day heat wave. So just like with COVID, the state's figuring out that they need to be more on top of this stuff and leaning forward, asking the county and the local governments, what are you doing? What are your plans? Do you need help? Do you need more money? What's the game plan for this? And I'm sure that's part of what they're going to do next time.
Gotcha. I know they talked about what, as you said, they felt like went right, or at least right to some degree, and maybe what could have been done better. And I noticed one thing they said was that cooling centers didn't have lines out the door, and it wasn't like they were at capacity. So they feel like they had cooling centers open and there was room. They're reevaluating where they could have opened those cooling centers. So TBD on that. There was something that they pointed out that they felt like absolutely went horribly wrong. And what can you tell us about that?
Well, that was 211. If you recall, in the week leading up to that, we and everybody else were saying, hey, if you need to know where a cooling center is or you need a ride, call 211. 211 will have the answer for you. Turns out, not so much. 211 was not staffed on the hottest weekend in recorded history in Oregon, at least this part of Oregon. They were not staffed. So that when people were calling, I think they were getting a recorded message that did not have that kind of information. So when the state folks found out about that, they started getting complaints. They called, they verified it. They called the head and said, what's it going to take? And basically it was going to take more money. So the state sent some money, they staffed it up, and things got fixed. But I don't think it occurred to anybody that that place would not be staffed during the heat wave on the weekend.
Yeah, that was really crazy to see in retrospect. Okay, we know the county has a press conference tomorrow on this same topic, and we'll obviously cover that. But my last question for you, we just explained why basically we feel like there is merit in seeing the names and the addresses of those who died. So my last question is, did state officials address in this news conference today whether they will release that information?
No, they did not.
All right. That about does it. We'll keep pressing. Pat Doris, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Pat's nothing if not blunt, right? All right, let's talk now about some of the dangers of the record-breaking heat outside of Portland, really in more rural areas. And in Marion County, we know a migrant farm worker died working in the elements. And his case was one of the first to spark calls for change and actually produce change. Enter now 2 women and a fundraiser. Here's Christelle Kumwe.
The clock in time is like 4:30, 4:45, and a typical day ends around 1 in the afternoon.
Cielo Rivera wanted to help sort cherries at an orchard in the gorge this summer to make a little extra money while home from college. She didn't realize what she had signed up for.
And I thought I was dying. It was so warm. I had to take my flannel off, my hoodie off. I was just in a t-shirt and sweats, and I wanted to go home.
That was before the heat wave. Cielo says temperatures that day were in the 80s.
I was even getting like heat allergies, I want to say. Like I was getting really stuffy, and like I had to keep blowing my nose, sneezing, and it was just because it started getting really hot.
Cielo spent hours outside, so she and her cousin would pack iced water in hydro flasks, insulated water bottles that kept the water cooler for longer.
Because we knew it was going to start getting hotter, and even in the 80-degree weather, a nice cold water bottle it keeps you going for the whole day.
They noticed farm workers only had small cups or jugs for water that would often be warmed up by the heat, so they offered them their hydro flasks.
And boy, at the end of the day, did they say, wow, this water has been the best water we've had the entire season, the picking season, because it stays nice and cool instead of really, really, really warm in the water jug.
The hydro flasks were a hit. That night, Cielo and her cousin created a GoFundMe to get one for each of the 150 migrant workers at the orchard.
And we thought $2,500 was a lot of money to ask for. And when we woke up that morning at 3, me and my cousin, it was already 75% fulfilled.
Cielo bumped it up to $6,500 and surpassed it. That's about 350 hydro flasks to help workers in several different orchards in the gorge.
I didn't realize that simple fruit, as simple as cherries, was such a difficult process, and the hours that get put behind it, the weather conditions, and they just work.
People need food in their table, right? So we will go through ice storms, which we have, pandemics, which we're currently doing, in a heat wave that recently just happened.
Patty Verduzco is with nonprofit Pacoon. She says farm workers often work through near impossible conditions to make ends meet. The advocacy group hosted vigils in honor of Sebastian Francisco Perez, the farm worker who died working in the excessive heat last month. Verduzco applauds Cielo's efforts and urges state officials to do more for those workers.
We need our farm workers to have shade, clean water, a place where they can rest, breaks, because it's tough out there.
Cielo knows how tough it can be out there. She hopes the effort continues to grow and help hundreds more.
I've never been more thankful, and I'm so proud that the community that I've grown up in is 100% behind me and making sure that these workers have the essentials.
After the deadly heat wave, Oregon OSHA adopted new emergency rules to help workers. Those include expanded access to cool water, shade, and regular breaks. They'll be in effect for the next 180 days while the agency develops permanent regulations this fall. I'm Christelle Kumwe for KGW News.
All right, Christelle, thank you. Water bottles. It's so simple. And here's another pretty simple solution that helps keep people cool: shade. And the best natural shade obviously comes from trees. And places without a lot of trees or a lot of vegetation can get a lot hotter, especially in cities in what's called a heat island. So for this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to consider donating to Friends of Trees. They plant trees in neighborhoods throughout Oregon and Southwest Washington, and they help restore natural green areas. It's all in an effort to fight climate change, frankly, and provide natural shade to areas that don't have it. So to donate, just open the camera on your phone, point it at the QR code on your screen. You can also go to kgw.com/help. And once you're on the donation page, just select KGW in the drop-down menu under the How Did You Hear About Us question. I spoke with the deputy director of Friends of Trees earlier today about how their work helps keep areas cool.
We have so much, asphalt and impervious surface in our cities. And when the sunlight hits those spaces and radiates back up, it creates what we are experiencing, which is the urban heat island effect. And so by planting trees and plants and creating more green infrastructure within our city, parks, and natural areas, we are mitigating the effects of the urban heat island effect by cooling our streets, by cooling our buildings, and by cooling our streams and rivers.
Yeah, it's important work. Here's that QR code again. We're calling this a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small.
We've already got our first mega fire of the year, and they're not messing around when it comes to evacuations.
Those people were all at risk of potentially dying or, were getting injured.
And even though the Bootleg fire is burning in Oregon, it's actually threatening the power grid in California. When the story continues.
lot of comments. A lot of comments coming in on this Monday night. We always go through your questions and your comments during the break, so keep them coming with the hashtag HeyDan. A lot of angry ones tonight, which we love. You can also send them to the story at kgw.com. All right, switching gears on this Monday. Ever since last fall's devastating wildfire season, all of us have nervously been waiting to see what this year will bring. The entire state is in a drought, and we have had this heat wave that we just talked about, and now we have prime conditions for wildfires. So much so that there are now bans on outdoor fires and fireworks throughout the Northwest. And we now have our first mega fire burning here in Oregon. It's frankly too soon to tell what the damage is going to be, but the Bootleg fire is growing fast. It's burning right now in southern Oregon, and it's been nearly doubling in size every single day since it started last week. Here is a look at the perimeter of the fire as of this morning. It's burning in Klamath County. That is one of the driest areas of the state right now. Since it began less than a week ago, it's already grown to more than 150,000 acres. That's larger than the city of Portland. The city of Portland. And this fire is not contained at all. It's burning mostly in the Fremont-Wainema National Forest. But there are towns and homes nearby, and 7 structures have already burned. 7 structures. The fire is also burning near the towns of Bly, Beatty, and the Sprague River. And evacuation orders are in place. And that said, take a look at this evacuation map. You might be pretty familiar with the 3 levels of evacuations by now. Unfortunately, after last year, we all are. But if you're not, the areas in green are at level 1. Those people need to be ready to go. Yellow is level 2. That's get set. And get ready to leave at a moment's notice. And then anyone living in the red areas of that map are level 3. And that means go now, get out now. It's time to go. Now, we all know that there are people in natural disasters, we see this in all kinds of disasters, who don't want to leave their homes. They'll try and ride it out for any number of reasons. But here's one thing that's different about this fire. You see, the sheriff's office in Klamath County isn't playing around. They're saying that they're ready to arrest anyone who's in the level 3 zone and isn't leaving. And in fact, they're already handing out citations. They say they've already seen people behaving dangerously, and they also say that's putting everyone at risk.
One of the deputies was escorting 4 different vehicles with people inside in the level 3 when the fire was licking at their heels. Really, they were out trying to drive the fire. They got to one area and they ended up having to turn around because their escape route was blocked. So they had to go the other way. That is what prompted the sheriff to say, we are taking this seriously. Because his deputy, those people were all at risk of potentially dying or, were getting injured.
So firefighters say there is unnecessary traffic on roads that they've closed, and it's hurting their ability to fight this fire. And they haven't said yet whether they've actually arrested anyone or how many citations they've given out. Now, the second thing that stands out about this fire, the threat of arrest, is number 1. Here's number 2. This one has to do with power. It's not just the fire's own power, but it's power grids. Check out this headline in the Washington Post. Bootleg fire rages through Oregon, threatening California's electricity supply. The paper is reporting that this fire is threatening what's known as Path 66, a major route shuttling power between the Northwest and California. And the New York Times reports Governor Gavin Newsom in California signed executive orders allowing the use of backup generators and auxiliary ship engines for power, thereby easing California's dependency on this grid. Now, the state, the Times reports, is, quote, just a step away from rolling blackouts. So how this happens and frankly what we mere mortals can do to mitigate the damage of this type amid a mounting climate crisis is very complex. Thankfully, ABC 10, our sister station in Sacramento, has been digging into this very topic for years through their investigative series, Fire, Power, Money. This is a look at their investigation into one company's, power company's role in the deadly Camp Fire in Paradise, California in 2018. Pacific Gas and Electric Company pleaded guilty to 84 felony counts of manslaughter and then filed for bankruptcy. The full series is now up on YouTube, and you can see they very clearly know their stuff. So Back to the Bootleg fire, the one burning now, and the threats that it's now posing to that power connection between Oregon and California. I turned to the investigative reporter behind that piece, Brandon Rittiman, for some perspective.
I think it's going to be surprising for a lot of people to learn just how connected these systems can be, and that an outage in Southern Oregon can affect the rest of the West Coast or other parts of the West Coast. So can you help educate us on why that is, basically?
Yeah. One power line or a corridor of power lines can be a huge deal to an entire region. And we don't tend to think of it this way, Maggie, but electricity is quite literally the world's biggest machine, as one of my experts puts it. So whenever you flip a light switch, that's what you're really operating. And those big high tension lines are really the backbone of that machine. They call them transmission lines in the industry because they move lots of power, hundreds or thousands of miles. And there are known bottlenecks in the grid between them. A good example is what you're seeing right now. This is on the south side of this complex is a big bottleneck. It's called Kilowatt, California. And this is where the power company for most of NorCal plugs into the big power company for SoCal. And the point I want you to understand here is that most of America's giant network of these big power lines is owned by private for-profit companies. And they really drive the system and where those bottlenecks are going to be between all of them. The electrons that you charge into your phone every night can come from across town, or they can come from across several states away.
So can you just, I think, give us some perspective on how much power moves through these corridors?
Yeah, so it really can be a surprising amount. Now, you may not think a lot of it when you see those big steel towers way out in the boonies, but the lines those are holding can carry more power than a major city needs. The Bootleg fire gave us a really good example. California's main grid operator said over the weekend they were planning on losing 5,000 megawatts of capacity from the corridor affected by that fire. Now, if you were to take a snapshot of the most energy-sucking moment in all of California history, we're talking about 1/10 of the power the whole state of California was using that day. A tenth of California is about 4 million people. So that corridor has the power you need for about 4 million people, all using air conditioning on a blazing hot day, all running through that one place. And I'm sure there are corridors with bigger capacity than that.
Our thanks to Brandon Rittiman and ABC 10. New episodes of Firepower Money are due out next month. But once again, the full series so far is up now on YouTube. We highly recommend it. All right, let's check out the vaccine counts for tonight. Cue the giant numbers. More than 2.5 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose, according to the CDC, and that works out to about 59.5% of the state's total population. That includes all kids and adults, even though kids under 12 aren't eligible to get the vaccine yet. And we want to give you an idea of how much of the state is getting vaccinated just with that number. So in Washington, let's switch over now. More than 4.75 million people have gotten at least their first dose, according to the CDC, which works out to about 62.4% of the state's entire population. Gotta love the giant numbers. All right, keep sending in your questions and your comments with the hashtag HeyDan. I'll read a few when we finish the story next. All right, welcome back. If you haven't eaten dinner already, you're about to get really hungry. We're going to talk pizza. On Friday, if you missed it, we kind of had a pizza-themed show. We got a little obsessed. All of this stems from this controversial story in Bloomberg that named Portland the best pizza city in America. You heard that right. Not New York, not Chicago, Little Portland, Oregon. It's based off a new book called Modernist Pizza, and the authors tried more than 400 pizzas across the country. They decided Portland was the top. They even listed their top 8 pizza places in the city, and they named 2 as the best of the best: Ken's Artisan Pizza and Pizza Shoals. So on Friday, Dan decided to try those 2 pizzas on the show. I know his job is so hard. He picked the overall champ, Pizza Shoals. It was so good. And then we asked you what your favorite pizza spot is, and we got a lot of spicy results into our inbox through Facebook as well, tweets, you name it. The overwhelming favorite, Flying Pie Pizzeria, which is not on that controversial Bloomberg list. Your next top places are Ken's and Escape from New York Pizza, followed by American Dream, Pizza Shoals, to round out the top 5. Many of you recommended other spots, including one person who said Domino's. Sir, if that's insulting, no judgment here. If your favorite place is not on the list, though, just let us know. Email the story at kgw.com. Reach out on Twitter. All right. To wrap it up here, we got a lot of responses to our push from the state and from the county to release medical information. Amy wrote in and said that we don't have any business having that information. And then Roger wrote in and he's angry at the state and he says he wants them to release more and do more. So again, we're going to keep pressing. Doesn't mean we're going to publish the information, but we think we should look for patterns in that. But keep sending us in. Keep writing in and telling us what you think. Finally, our team cracked up at this. Harriet wrote in and said that she loves watching the story. She thinks that me anchoring is like too perfect, and she would prefer Dan, who's more vulnerable. I feel like that's like kind of a backhanded insult to me, but also to Dan. Not really sure what to do with it. We're all very emotional here, but I love how much you love watching the story and having opinions on what we do, how we do it. Everybody's here just having a good time. So thank you guys for watching, and stick around because the news at 6:30 with Brittany Falkers is coming up next.